Welcome to our overview presentation of the CS-DCC. My name is Michelle Edwards, and I'm one of the co-PIs on the project. And today I'm going to talk to you about the 5 W's and 1 H. So I love the who, what, where, when, why, and how of how we're tackling the Climate Smart Data Collaboration Center. And in doing so, I'm going to try to position it with some of the age-old questions that I'm hearing a lot about lately about that surround research data. Now, just a couple of logistical things. I am on a laptop with just one screen because I'm in the middle of a workshop slash conference. So if there are any questions, I'm going to ask you if we can hold them until the end, and we'll tackle them all near the end. So with that, let's get started. Okay, let's get started. All right, here we are. So I want to start by setting the background. Most of us, we all work with research data in one capacity or another, as a collector, as a PI, as a steward, as a data archivist, or maybe somebody in industry that's worked with data. But I want to kind of take that step back and think about, what's special about this research data. I'm struggling in some of these meetings I've been attending lately. Some of the questions that keep coming up over and over and over. And it's, it warms my heart to know that we're starting to all value data, but it really is frustrating at the same time because we're not doing anything about it. So let's start with some of these general questions that I've been hearing over. Can has that. Or I wonder, somebody must have collected that data somewhere along the line. Gee, I really wonder if it exists. In the research world, we tend to do this by talking to people. Well, I talked to Mary, who talked to Joe, who talked to Henry, who said, yeah, somebody is collecting that data, but you'll have to talk to this person and that person and see whether it really does exist and what format and that kind of thing. So the question about what data exists is prevalent, whether it's in the research world, whether it's in the industry world, whether it's in the government world. It's a question that we are all asking. Once we determine that, oh yes, somebody is collecting that data does exist, the next natural question that I hear is, well, where is it? And that's, again, one of these questions like, oh gosh, where is that data? So let's use an example. I'm working with beef, or I've worked with beef in the past, and we have different beef herds across the country. So I know there's data potentially out west, there's some here in Elora, there's some out east. But where is this specific data? So now I have to start this whole trek of finding the right person to talk to ask the question. If they know the answer, great. They might have to push me off to somebody else, but there's a time lag. That lag in communication and trying to figure out, well, where is that data? So that's one of these big challenges with our research data today. I can think about this where's data on a national basis. I can think about it internationally. I know there's this really cool project in the EU that's collecting this. Who do I talk to? How do I figure out where it is? I can take it right down to the local area. So I'm thinking about our research firms here. We have numerous sources of data that comes in. But one of the questions I asked my manager the other day is, well, can you tell me where the data sits, where these vendors are, and where the data is? And I can pull it right down to my local laptop. I've been working in RDM for many years now. I like to think my laptop is nicely organized, but inevitably, question comes up every week. Where did I put that report? Where did I put that data? So this where is the data question, we all can relate to it. First question is, does the data exist? Then, okay, it exists. Well, where is it? Let's dig down a little further. What is the data? Another lovely, fun question. How many of us have received an Excel file? I mean, let's be honest. Most of us work in Excel. Most of our students work in Excel. Received an Excel file, bunch of columns, lovely. Might have some headings on it. Okay. Do I understand what all those headings are? Well, maybe, maybe not. I can probably guess, which a lot of us tend to do, unfortunately. But without any additional information other than just that Excel file, I have no idea what that data is. If I think outside of research data, so think about, Statistics Canada data. So I've worked with them for many years in the past. They do a wonderful job at documenting what the data is, where the survey is, what the questions are, what the possible answers are, who answered it, what the strata was, and all that. It's wonderful stuff. we're not doing that great a job just yet in the research, in the agriculture, in the agri-food research world yet. So what is the data is a huge challenge. I'm also going to be very straightforward and say, if a student gives me an Excel spreadsheet with just numbers and no headings and no additional information, it's garbage. I can't do anything with it unless I understand what that data is. So the next question that comes to mind when I'm thinking about, well, what is the data? Is this, I love apples and oranges. So are we comparing apples to apples, or are we comparing apples to oranges? So what do I mean by that? Thinking about, I'll go back to my beef. I've got a heading there called WT. I'm going to guess and be pretty sure that it's weight. Awesome. And I can confirm that with the person that collected the data. Wonderful. But without that additional information, was that weight collected in kilograms or was it collected in pounds? I don't know. Should I know? Should there be something else in there, in that information related to that document or related to that data that tells me it's apples and apples or oranges and oranges? Yes, we need that additional information. We need to know what technologies were used to collect the data. Thinking about, I'm going to keep going back to my beef cattle here. Scales. So I have a weight measurement. I found out that it's measured in kilograms. Great. But how were the weights measured? Were they measured as the animals walked across the scale? Were they measured as the animals stood in the chute? Different ways, different technologies, and that's going to help us, if we have that information, help us to determine whether we're talking apples or apples and apples or oranges. Oh, here's my favorite one. Can I share the data? Do I own the data? So let's walk through a little example here. PI, obtains funding from, let's say, a company. They were lucky enough to obtain some money from a third-party company to conduct some research. The PI has a master's student collecting that data for them. So the master's student goes out and does a wonderful job collecting the data, knows all the ins and outs about documentation, does a fabulous job documenting that data. And they're nearing the end of their program, so they go to a conference and they're presenting their results. And at the end of their presentation, another colleague comes up to them and says, hey, you know what? You've done some great stuff. Can you share your data so that I can build on it so I can continue doing great research at another institution? So what does that master's student do? They collected the data. They put the work in it. They put all the hours into doing everything around this Excel spreadsheet that they have. Do they not have the opportunity to share that data? Can they share that data? So all these questions sound so easy, yeah, we can do this. And these questions are coming up over and over and over, whether it's in the research world, whether it's in the industry world, whether it's in the government world. All of these questions are coming up over and over. Now let's take this question and flip it to the other side. I discovered that, oh my gosh, there's this wonderful data set out west, and it's going to help me with my research. I want to be able to access it. So can I access it? Do I have the rights to access it? How do I go about finding out whether I can? Who do I talk to? And how do I access it? So all of these questions. So does the data exist? Where's the data? What is the data? Are we talking apples and oranges? And can I access, or can I share the data? All of these questions keep coming up in these different meetings. And we can all relate to them. I'm sure everybody on this call has experience in all of these different questions. Now, you're all going, hang on, Michelle, you're here to talk about the data hub. What do these have to do with the data hub? Is the data hub or the CS-DCC going to solve all these questions? Not particularly, not really. But what we're doing is we're going to enable you to answer the questions for your own research. Everybody has a different perspective. Everybody has different needs in their research. And what we're here to do is to enable you to be able to answer those questions. So how are we going to do that? And this is where my who, what, where, when, why. Sorry, I love that saying. Who, what, where, when, why, and how we're going to accomplish these. So let's work our way through these 6 questions. Can you tell I love questions too? So who are we? Many of you have encountered us either personally through different meetings, in-person meetings, or online. So you're all aware that there are 3 institutions that are participating in CS-DCC. There's University of Guelph, there's Laval, and there's Simon Fraser. We have a fairly large team, which we are very proud of, and we're doing some awesome work and really moving things along at a very nice clip and trying to engage our ICTs as often as we can and as often as we need. So what? So if you visited the webpage in the past little while, you would have noticed our vision and our mission. So I'm going to read these out to you, so my apologies, because I want to highlight a couple aspects of these that are really key to what we're doing with the Data Hub. So our vision is to enhance climate resilience and support Canadian agri-food genomic research by establishing a data ecosystem for the exchange of research data and knowledge. How we're going to do that, our mission, is to develop and offer infrastructure, tools, training, and forums for agri-food data researchers, which include an interoperable and distributed data ecosystem to empower you to enhance your data assets and amplify your research impact. So things I want to highlight, and I want you to keep in mind as we continue through this process and continue to develop the Data Hub, is the exchange of research data and knowledge. That's key to what the Data Hub is all about, is how do we enable you to exchange research data where possible, and how do we help you exchange data knowledge or research knowledge? We're here to develop and offer items such as tools, training, and forums to help open discussions, to help open that exchange of knowledge as to how to deal with the research data. And we're building an interoperable and distributed data ecosystem. Remember those terms, because they're gonna pop up in the next slide. So that is what we're doing. So who we are, 3 institutions, and this is what we're trying to accomplish. Now the where. So these are questions that have been popping up a little bit. I hear a little whisper here and there, and I had a member of one of the ICTs say, "Hey, Michelle, I've had colleagues asking me whether Data Hub is going to hold our data. The Data Hub's going to, be a repository for our data." So the answer is no. No, we are not going to ask you for your data, and we're not going to hold your data. You keep your data. Remember in the last slide, I said interoperable and distributed data ecosystem. That's what this is all about. You hold your data. We're going to help you make it fair, so findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable, but you hold your data. And I think that's important for everybody to be aware of. So I talked about the who, the what, the where, now the when. So different times that you have interacted with us or we have tried to interact with you started way back, God, it's almost 2 years ago. Okay, a year and a half ago. But as soon as I see 2024, I think 2 years. So back when this fall started, we had introductory meetings with our ICTs to give you all a little sense as to who we are and what we're trying to accomplish. In March of 2025, that's when the work started, and that's when we introduced you to the semantic engine, and we asked you to complete some data schemas. Now, I'm going to poke and prod about this throughout the rest of this presentation. So we asked you to create data schemas, and you did a great job creating the one data schema. Now we're going to keep asking you to update those data schemas because we need updated data schemas, and we know you're collecting more data now than you were back in 2025. In May of 2025, we also discussed the potential for an Illumina offer for you to participate in. We are just in the final phases of finishing off that offer, so you will see some more information coming through your email in the next few weeks about that. In June 2020, I'm going to stop saying 2025. In June last year, our first task force was formed, the VITA task force, which represents the vocabulary and examples of data agreements. So we like to call it the VITA task force. We also offered our first training scholarship, and since then we've offered 2 more offerings of it, which is where we have funding to offer you to support a grad student or a postdoc, or in this latest round, an undergraduate student, to conduct a research project that relates to the CSAPS portfolio, and that can help the Data Hub and or the KMIC Hub. Again, about 3-4 weeks ago, you would have received an email from us asking for updated data schemas. That's poke number 2. We want to see more of those data schemas because they're only going to help us move on to our next steps in the Data Hub development. Lose you? Okay, am I still here?
Yeah, you came back.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. That's what happens when you work on campus. So back in last year, our training coordinator reached out to all of the ICTs to assess or to determine what you needed in terms of training opportunities. And since then, he's been doing a great job at creating different opportunities with different individuals over the last few semesters. And just as a quick update, we are working with CBW, so Canadian Bioinformatics Workshop, to create a new workshop for our CSAS portfolio, and that will be hopefully developed and offered later this fall. We're tackling a new way to work with our ICTs and work with our groups, and we're calling them focus groups, looking to offer them every month. Our first one was in February, so last month, so many of you participated in the Semantic Engine focus group. And I want to say thank you very much to those that participated. You provided a lot of very valuable information to our team. So they are looking at it and looking to implement and make changes according to your feedback. Our next focus group is actually happening next week on data harmonization. So there are 2 sessions, I believe Tuesday and Thursday next week. If you are interested in participating and have not received the email or lost it, let us know and we can resend that information. And we're also looking at a new focus group in April, looking at the topic of using your DMPs as SOPs. So using your data management plans as standard operating guides for your labs. We are always interested to hear what you would like to see in these focus groups. So if there's a particular topic you're interested in, let us know and we'll add it to our roster. But these are the first few that we have at the moment. So I talked about the who, the what, the where, the when. How about the why? Like, why are we doing it? Why are we doing it in this way? This one statement on the left side here kind of summarizes it all in one fell swoop. Fragmented research efforts often lead to redundancy, slower uptake, and slower knowledge transfer. If I don't know what data exists, if I don't know where that data is, if I don't know what's inside the data, if I don't know whether I can access it, chances are I'm going to find another way to do this research. I'm going to see if I can find another funding agency to fund my own copy of this research. And so that's going to be redundant. So I've got another version of this project on the go. It's going to slow the transfer of information. So our main goal is to help reduce that redundancy, help increase that uptake, and increase that transfer of knowledge and transfer of research data where that's possible. So remember, our vision is to enhance what you're doing by building and establishing that data ecosystem to exchange research data and knowledge. So that's the why. All right, so let's get down to the meat of it. How in the world are you going to accomplish all this? Because you've been asking 10 million questions, Michelle, so let's get down to it. So what is the data? So remember there were those 5 questions I asked at the beginning. What is the data was the 3rd question. The semantic engine, you've been introduced to that. You've got some data schemas out there. Let's see if I can do this without breaking everything. Awesome. So right now, the data schemas that you have provided us are all listed in this schema library. So now I can take a look at some of these schemas. So let's pick on CatG. I never picked the same one, so my apologies, but I can see that, look at this great information. They have a data file that they're looking at cow production information. Look at all the cool information they're collecting. There's the attributes, so the headings at the top of their Excel file. There's label and description. I can see what they're actually collecting. I can understand what they're collecting. I can see that they've got some entry codes. So they got 2 farms. And look at this. I can see units. I know what kind of data, what unit the data is. Remember I was talking about weights? There you go. Some of the projects have many data schemas. And again, thank you for doing that. Thank you for fulfilling that. Others don't have as many, and that's great. So we're hoping to receive a lot more. But looking at this data schema library, if you have the opportunity, take a peek at it. Take a look at all the different data that is being collected currently by your fellow ICTs. So the question about what is the data? Well, now we know what the data is because you have provided us with data schemas. We put them in one little place, and now I can get a better sense as to what is the data. So if I was to see an Excel spreadsheet with that information, I could look at those headings. I could go to the data schema and get a better sense as to what those headings mean and what data you're collecting. So what is the data? We're well on our way to accomplishing or answering that question. The apples and oranges to oranges. So we are currently have a new task force that's working on ontologies and looking at ways to harmonize the data. So harmonizing the data to make sure that we are talking apples and not apples and oranges, right? I'm sorry, I keep using that analogy. It's just a favorite one of mine. So the task force is doing things like this. So there are a number of ontologies. Think about them as standardized ways of talking about different topics. So Damien and his team have put this particular diagram together. So you can see when I'm looking at phenological traits in plants, there are a number of different ontologies that can be used to describe a particular term. So I'm looking at this and I can see there's something called TO, something called agro, PATO, PO. This is out of my wheelhouse, but I appreciate what we're trying to do here. We're trying to make sure that everybody that says, hey, days to germinate, that we're using the same terminology, which is great. So this is what Damien and his team has put together. And what we're trying to do now is pull in what are the different teams doing. So what are the terms some of the teams are using and how do they relate to these topics? So again, next week, there are 2 sessions dealing with data harmonization that will tap a little bit more into this that are available for you to come and have a chat with us about. The other aspect of harmonizing the data is thinking about making these pick lists, or I call them entry codes. Everybody uses a different term. So these are provinces, and many of our teams and many, different collection agencies and whatnot collect the information across provinces. So I like to look at this commonly used code. I mean, this is something that, most of us might recognize. I mean, I'll be honest. I'm one of these. I'm old fogey. Okay, Newfoundland to me is still NFLD, and I know it's Newfoundland and Labrador, but still NFLD is what I grew up with. Prince Edward Island's PEI. So you can see how some folks might use different terms, might use different codes for the provinces or different. What do you want to call them? I can't. The word's gone. Anyway, the other thing that to think about is QC is an interesting one. QC is used for Quebec. But are we talking Quebec, the province, or are we talking Quebec, the city, right? Could be used interchangeably. And we want to ensure that we're all talking, sorry guys, apples and apples, not apples and oranges. Okay, we want to make sure that we're all using this terminology. So if, this goes back to my StatsCan days, in the statistical agencies, there is a standardized code. So there's a standardized geographical code, code that is commonly used for provinces. And I'm recommending that this is something that we take a look at. So to ensure that, when I'm talking about Quebec, the code's 24. We all know that 24 is Quebec, and Quebec is the province, not the city. When I say 35, I know that it's Ontario. So different ways of looking at how do we harmonize data so that we're all talking about the same thing. So we're working on this. We're working towards comparing the apples to apples and not the apples to oranges. So again, new task force. There's focus groups next week. If you're interested in coming to chat, learn a little bit more about that, please sign up. So other questions that I asked way at the beginning of this presentation are what data exists, or does the data exist, and where is the data? So the data schema library is the beginning, is the start. So in that data schema library, we know that there's some data being collected by these different ICT teams. We could then pop out and say, okay, ICT, benefit is located here, and this person is responsible for it and whatnot. Some of that information is actually available in the schema. But we have a new task force working on our phase 2 work, concentrating on this particular section, is building a catalog now. So thinking about, okay, we've got these data schemas. They're related to the data that's being collected, but now let's bring it up a level. Let's talk about what the project is about. So how do we build a catalog? How do we standardize the information for each project? How do we standardize who the PIs are, where they're from, what the information is, and that kind of thing? Can we share the information? Can we not share the information? So this is what we're working on now. Look, there's some great work happening. I'm very excited. Hopefully we can show off some of this by later this year, but try that again, Michelle. We're making strides in this area. So again, this is where it's very key for you to update your data schemas as well. So both for the harmonization piece, for us to better understand where we can help harmonize some of the information, but also to help us understand what data is being collected and how much of it is being collected to help us develop these catalog entries. So now, with a catalog, we can now see if the data exists, and we know where to find it. Sounds easy, doesn't it? I'm making it sound way too easy. So the last questions, of course, are, can I share the data? Do I own the data? Can I use it? Can I have access to the data? We can spin our heads on these questions and just go back and forth. So they're not easy questions to answer, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The VITA task force has been working with these questions since its inception. They've been working on it for almost a year now. And they've come to the point where they're developing a tool called the Data Request Tracker. And that tool is going to help people to start that data sharing, data use agreement, start that negotiation. So it captures the conversation, captures the questions. So standardizing the questions of how are you going to use your data, who's going to use it, who's going to access it, why, length, and that kind of thing. I don't want to talk too much about this because there's a lot of work on it, and I don't want to do any injustice. So please, if you've got specific questions on this one, I'm really hoping that we'll offer a focus group or a workshop on this in the coming months. So again, looking at, can I share the data? Do I own the data? Do I have access? We have the task force that's working on it, and we have a tool that's being developed, almost ready for release, to help people negotiate that data sharing and data use agreement. So we're getting there. So the how, we're getting there. So just to kind of pull this all together, as we start developing more tools and as we start to ameliorate or make better some of the tools that we have already, we are guided by 4 core principles. These are data ownership and sovereignty. We recognize that researchers and communities control their data. We respect governance, privacy, and community principles such as OCAP and inclusivity for Indigenous communities. Our second guiding principle is fair and responsible openness. We prioritize FAIR principles, so findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, and encourage openness through graduated and equitable sharing where appropriate, always balancing trust, ethics, and security. Our third core principle that guides our development is capacity building across the data lifecycle. From active working data sets to published data archives, we provide tools, catalogs, and workflows to make collaboration easier. And our last but not least of our core principles is automation and interoperability. We enable machine-readable formats, standardized schemas, and vocabularies for seamless integration and reuse. Whew, that's a lot of words, isn't it? But you get a better sense as to who we are, what we're doing, and how we're accomplishing it, and all the different questions that we're trying to answer all at the same time, all keeping in mind that we're here to enable you to exchange research data and knowledge. Now, lots of words, lots of talking. Some of us really love diagrams. So I'm hoping this diagram can kind of summarize everything in one fell swoop. Thinking about where we started and where we're heading. So we start with data sets with a bunch of numbers, bunch of information, and we're adding metadata. We're creating data schemas to better understand what that data is. And then we're moving now towards the ontology integration to work towards harmonizing some of the data that we are collecting across these different projects, those that have similar themes. We're working towards developing that data catalog. So now we can search across, go to some website, we can search to see, what data is being collected, where it is, how it is, what variables are collected, what the methodologies and all that great, wonderful information. And then being able to access that data will be driven through data use agreements that will be developed with the assistance of our data request tracker. The one piece on this slide that you'll notice on the bottom that I did not talk about is the analytics platform. When we started the DCC, most of you told us that you did not need access to an analytics platform. However, what we want to do is we want to provide the opportunity for you to test and for opportunity for you to use different platforms to see whether they better fit your projects or not. So that is an option that we're still looking into. So we have the Illumina offer coming up soon, DNA Stack, and if you need any help with accessing the DRAC resources or the Digital Research Alliance of Canada resources, please let us know. We're here to help you out. We're here to make things as easier as possible when it comes to the research data and to the genomics platforms. So with that, I've talked a lot, didn't realize that I was going to be talking this long. But if you are at all curious and not quite sure about what we're doing and want a little bit more information about it, maybe you want to dig in a little bit, please take a look at some of the resources we've built up over the past 2 years. On the left-hand side, you will see there's the link to our GitHub. For those of you that are GitHub phobic, it's a really nice readable format. So you don't have to get into the repositories if you don't want to. There's some nice pages that are very readable, lots of documentation on what we are doing and the backup information of why we've chose to go certain paths. On the right-hand side, you will see a link to the webpage. The webpage takes you to the CSAF's portfolio. So it takes you to CSAF's network. But you will see that there are there's information on Ag Act, the KMIC hub, as well as the data hub. So please take a few minutes and take a boo as to what information is there. It's lots of really cool stuff. With that, I'm going to stop talking now, and I want you to keep in mind that we are here to help you. Right? We're here to enable you to exchange research data where possible, where you want, and to help you exchange that research knowledge. We're here to help. We're here to help. I just want to keep it at that. We're just here to help. So with that in mind, I want to thank you for your attention, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm really hoping that there are other members of the DCC Hub here to help answer questions as they may come up. So thank you very much. And